And joining us today, we have Dr. Ruhiyyih Dyrdahl-Young with BASF, and we appreciate the time here, Ruhiyyih. Thanks for joining us today.
Jesse, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Let's dive right in. Let's talk about controlling pests and pest management in our soybean crop. And obviously, thinking about just this year alone with just the tightness of the supply side and looking at prices and, growers are looking at that ROI. It's going to be more important than ever, I would think, to manage some of those yield robbing pests on our operation in our soybean fields this year.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jesse. When I look at soybean prices, north of $14, this could very well be potentially one of the most lucrative crops in a farmer's career. So when I'm thinking about it, I think, missing out on that top end yield potential is a lot bigger of a deal this season with a crop potentially this valuable than maybe any other season we've ever seen.
Well, I know one of the big insect pressures we have to watch in our soybean fields is aphids. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the worries that are out there when it comes to soybean aphids here this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I think about aphids as a pest, it's one of those things where you have a bad aphid year or not. Last year, we seemed like up in some of the more northern parts of the Corn Belt, we managed to not have a lot of aphid pressure last year, but still had really bad spider mites flared up and a bunch of other pests, right? So you mentioned it earlier, but we as an agricultural community are facing some challenges, right? This is a very valuable crop. And so one of the things I think is essential every year, but really essential this year, is that we have a plan in place. Aphid thresholds, the best way to know is to go to your local ag extension and look for that threshold. But I can say by and large, they're pretty low thresholds, so you got a problem. And they tend to really have a strong exponential increase. So my advice would be to plan now to make a fungicide application and an insecticide application. Those two timings usually mix really, really well. And to apply Revitech fungicide at R3 and pair it with Renestra insecticide, because you're going to be able to take care of your broad spectrum pests, broad spectrum disease control, and just make the plan now to have the application.
Well, and you mentioned some of those products as well, and I have to think with the rising input costs, it's something that this isn't a year to cut back on certain, products that we're using in our fields, regardless of prices, et cetera, because they are extremely important to farmers' ROI.
Absolutely. And soybeans is one of those crops that really responds well to good management. You put money into your fungicide, you're going to see it coming back out. And the same is true with the insecticide. We talked a little bit about soybean aphids being, spotty. You'll have a bad aphid run or not. But a lot of years you're going to have insect pressure, whether we're talking about Japanese beetle or bean leaf beetle, army worms. Just there's a whole host of insects that are going to be on your crop potentially. So one of the things that I really like about Renestra insecticides, it's a dual mode of action. So right away you have a knockdown from a pyrethroid, plus we have Safina, which is a brand new mode of action against aphids. So I don't think of personally, I haven't seen really, really strong performance from an aphicide from a pyrethroid alone. And that's really why I like the dual mode of action with kind of a special hitter for your piercing and sucking insects with the Safina, and you pair that with that broad spectrum control you get from a pyrethroid.
You mentioned a few of those other pests as well that we're watching out for. Is there anything that's really standing out to you and other agronomists in the field here as we get into this growing season that, outside of aphids, we really need to keep a close eye watching out for here this growing season?
Yeah, so I'm a big advocate with soybeans of doing a seed treatment, both fungicide, base, and an insecticide. BASF has an excellent seed treatment offering. But seed treatments are only there for that early season, right? Really helping during emergence and really helping with that early season pest pressure, right? But as that canopy starts to close, as the crop's putting on more and more biomass, any part of the leaf that gets eaten by an insect, taken out by a disease, is taking down that plant's photosynthetic capacity, right? And that that photosynthetic capacity going down just means less yield. It means the plant is spending more energy fighting disease and fighting insects than it is filling pods. So in a crop like this, where we're looking to max out our yield monitor, we really do want to make sure that we're attending to all that fungal disease and all that insect pressure.
Well, Ruhiyyih, fantastic insight. Any other final thoughts you'd like to share with us today before we run out of time?
Yeah, if people took away one part of this conversation, I would want them to make a plan for your fungicide and your insecticide application there. During R3 is usually a pretty ideal timing for that. You're going to get your best, we just hope everybody can get the best crop possible this year, and making the plan now. Right now, we're putting all the investment that we can into this crop, and I know the fungicide and the insecticide is the last decision that everybody makes during the season. Am I going to apply or not? This year, absolutely worth the investment. Think Revitech fungicide and Renestra insecticide. Renestra bringing you that dual mode of action with the broad spectrum pyrethroid and that really novel mode of action against aphids as well.
Well, we appreciate the time with that. Dr. Ruhiyyih Dyrdahl-Young with BASF, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Jesse, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.